there we go, record it, and we can get started. So thank you so much for joining me from all over the world. It's truly marvelous. I'd like to sort of take the next, maybe 20 minutes or so to reflect a little bit on what happened. And then it's really going to be a demonstration. I want you to roll up your sleeves, and I want to give you the tools, the ability to implement what I'm going to tell you about in your courses, in case that's of use with the current transition online. So let me switch to my slides here and get started. I'm sure that, like most of you, I was faced suddenly 5 weeks ago with the challenge of moving my course online in a time span of just a few days. Essentially, we had 5 days warning, and everybody had to move off campus. We had to vacate our offices, our labs. We're not allowed back on campus. Now, I was teaching I just finished a course actually yesterday. I was teaching a 75 student course. And that number 75 is simply because the physical space has a limitation of 75 students, which was a team and project-based course. So students work in teams of 5 students. You see in the background a picture of the course. It's not a usual auditorium. No, students sit in teams of 5 around round tables working on projects. In fact, the projects involve building things. So I had to move this course, which is in a very different format from a traditional course, online, including the projects, which, as you can imagine, at first seemed like a tremendous challenge. But in the time span of just a few weeks, I've learned to see this not as a challenge, but an opportunity. And this webinar is, in a sense, my attempt to convince you that we should see this as an opportunity and not a challenge, and that there are things that we can do in a move to online teaching that we might otherwise not have thought about. Now, those of you who've heard me speak before know that I'd like to think about teaching as a 2-step process. The first step on the left there is the information transfer, and the second step is for the students to make sense of that information, to extract from that information the mental models, to build the knowledge that permit the students to apply whatever he or she has learned in a different context and to solve problems. Now, in the traditional approach to teaching, and the mode in which I think still the majority of instructors around the world are, the information transfer is the part that takes place on campus, and then the sense making, of course, some of it will happen on campus too, and maybe even during the information transfer, but the bulk of it will be left to the students on their own when they work on the material asynchronously at home. And the information transfer, I sort of skipped saying that, is taking place in an auditorium in the form of an instructor-paced synchronous lecture. I had already changed it a long time ago, but it was sort of interesting to see what happened to my colleagues who were still teaching in this mode, because suddenly on March 10th, they were told move off campus. Since we had a license to Zoom at Harvard, essentially most of them ended up simply lecturing online, still instructor-paced, synchronously, using Zoom. In fact, that's what I'm doing now with you, but I won't be doing that for very long because we'll switch in a moment. Now, one of the things at Harvard is that we have a very diverse student body. I myself, for example, have a student in my classes from Ghana. I have quite a few students who are from Europe, from Berlin, and from London. I have students from the East Coast of the US. I have students on the West Coast of the US. I have students in New Zealand. So they're essentially spread out over the entire globe and in different time zones. And there are no time zones that are convenient for students spread out over the globe. So most of my colleagues, and myself too, whenever we use Zoom synchronously, use the record button, and then, of course, the student is watching not a synchronous lecture, but an asynchronous recorded lecture. And I still have the word instructor-paced at the top there because yes, when it's recorded, you could pause it, but it turns out that most students don't do that. In fact, they tend to put the playback speed to the highest level they can to get through the video as fast as they can, providing even less opportunity to, to process all of the information. But as we've made this transition, as some of my colleagues have made the transition from synchronous lecturing on campus to asynchronous recorded lectures on Zoom, something really interesting has happened because now in both of these parts of the course, the information transfer part and the sense-making part, the student is completely alone. And I would argue, even in the best of times, this is a bad idea because learning deep down is a social activity, not an isolated individual activity. But in times of social isolation, this is even worse because now not only are you socially isolated from your friends, from others, because of the pandemic, on top of that, education has become a lonely endeavor. That's not what I'm going to present to you. In fact, I've made you suffer through this for 10 minutes. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to present a model for doing the information transfer in a self-paced asynchronous way and the sense-making in an instructor-led synchronous way. And there are probably ways to do it asynchronously, but I'm going to show you that synchronously. In fact, even the information transfer, simply by virtue of the fact that we're all together in this webinar at the same time, it will be synchronous, but it doesn't have to be synchronous. And in fact, in my class, it is not synchronous. So let's explore, oh, and what is best, pardon me, before I jump into this, what is best is that both parts will be completely interactive. So students who are socially isolated at home and are hungering for connections to their friends are able to interact with others in the class in both parts of this educational process. And I'll present two evidence-based approaches. Those of you who've heard me speak before may have heard me speak about either one or both of them, but maybe not have thought about it in the context of remote learning or online teaching or however you want to call it. So let's explore these two steps, and we're going to explore these two steps using two free tools. And the first tool that I would like to present is a tool that I actually did not develop for online teaching. The purpose is very simple. When I transitioned to this to this team and project-based course, the one that you see illustrated on this picture that we've been looking at and that is still in the background here, I wanted to get rid completely of any type of lecturing. After all, the classroom was not conducive to lecturing. Students sit around a round table. If you were to visit my classroom, you'd be thinking I teach kindergarten rather than a college class because it's chaotic. The teams work together. Some are sitting on the floor, others are at the whiteboard. I mean, they're not paying any attention. They would not pay any attention to an instructor in front of the class. In fact, there is no front because it's more like a ballroom than an auditorium. So I wanted to solve the problem of lecturing, and it turned out that the platform that we developed, and two of my colleagues, Gary King and Kelly Miller, are online, and hopefully they're monitoring the chat and able to answer some of your questions as they arise. So that platform turned out to be fabulous and positioning me sort of in an advantageous spot when we transitioned online. I'm referring here to Perusal. So essentially, Perusal takes care of the asynchronous information transfer. It's a text-based social learning platform. And you will understand what it means once we dive into it. It's text-based rather than video-based because, as I alluded to earlier, I believe that with video, the students is still subject to the pace of the instructor, not his or her own pace. With text, as you read, you pace yourself and you're in control of the information flow. With video, you're not. And yes, you could pause the video, but it turns out students do not do that. Now, if you're completely sold on video and you want video, there's the opportunity to bring video into perusal by linking it to the text that you have there. But primarily, it's a text-based social learning platform. And essentially, when we developed this platform 5 or 6 years ago, it helped me to completely take the information transfer out of the classroom so I could help the students with the sense-making process when we were in the actual physical classroom. So here's what we're going to do. You will, at the same time as I do, create a dummy course. I'll create a course for you. You create just a course that is, you know, a dummy course, which you'll probably delete after this webinar, but simply so you know how to create a course. And then after you've created your course and I've created my course, I would ask you to join my course so that you get the student experience. Even if you already experimented with perusal, you may never have had the opportunity to experience what it is to be a student in a course that uses perusal. So that will provide you that experience. I will not be able, I should have said this earlier, but I will not be able to really motivate either of the two approaches that I'm going to present to you. I'm not going to show you the evidence of success, nor I'm going to tell you everything that I should really be telling you about the why we developed these approaches and why we're implementing them. At the end of the, because really I want to focus on the practical aspects of this, on the, you know, on the how. And if you're interested in the why and in the evidence that things actually do translate into learning improvements, at the end of this webinar, you'll get a link to a two-pager that provides all of that information. And if you forget to jot down the link, you'll get an email with that resource at the end. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to move the Zoom window to one side of your screen. And then, you know, so you may want to get out of the Zoom full screen view by hitting escape and move Zoom over to one side, make the window a little bit smaller, and then open your browser and go to app.perusal.com, the URL that's shown on my slide there. If you have an account, because you've played with Perusal in the past, then log in and wait for those who don't have an account yet to catch up with us. If you do not have an account, which I assume a number of you won't, then follow along with me. So again, put Zoom on one side, have your browser on the other side, type in app.perusal.com, and then there are two ways in which you can sign in. You can either use one of your social media profiles, but if you prefer not to do that, you can click register at the bottom, and with a little bit of information, 4 fields, if I recall correctly, you will be registered. So I'm going to pause here for just a moment. So there are just not 3 steps, but 2, with 2 alternatives for signing in. You have either via your social media profile or by clicking register at the bottom. And if you already have an account, you would log in either again via the social media profile or by entering your username and password, and hold off for a second before you continue. So for those of you who have just created an account, congratulations, you've taken the first step, made an account. The next step would be to indicate whether you want to join a club or create or enroll in a course. Choose that first one because we want to create a course. So click on create or enroll in a course. And if you're logged in with an existing account, you would, and you've already logged in, you may want to click the create course tile at the top left of your perusal page. For the people who just created an account, the next step will be to indicate that you are an instructor. Yes, I want you later to be a student in my course, but as an instructor, you can be a student, but as a student, you cannot be an instructor. If accidentally you've indicated you're a student, there's a code that can be entered to upgrade you to an instructor account. I don't know if Kelly knows that in case you need to readjust it. But choose, I'm an instructor. And then for everyone, because now we should be more or less on the same page, those of you who have a new account and those of you who already had an account, indicate that you want to create a course for students to access directly at perusal.com. The other choice is to integrate it with your learning management system. I personally integrate Perusal in Canvas because that's the learning management system that we use at Harvard. But essentially, Perusal is compatible with any LTI compatible learning management system. However, you know, we all have different learning management systems, Blackboard, Moodle, Desire to Learn, whatever. And getting it all integrated with these different learning management systems would be too much work right now. So we're not going to do that. So select for students to access directly at Perusal. In the two-pager that I'll give the link to at the end of the webinar, there'll be a link to how to integrate Perusal with your learning management system. The other thing that I want to draw your attention to is the institution. As you type the name of your institution, it may not appear. If it does not appear, please type in example institution, the way it's shown here on the screen, and email support@perusal.com so we can add your institution to the list. I'm going to switch to my browser right now so you can see my browser rather than my slide, and we'll go live. Okay, so here's my browser. And if I click on create a course, which I hope those with an account have done, who have an account have done as well, we're all at the same page. So I'm going to type in Flip Online Webinar. What is it today? 4:30. Institution, Harvard University. Again, if your institution does not show up, type example space institution. The course start date is today. Oops, not May 7th. Today. And the end date, I'll put it tomorrow. And I would like you to leave everything else on that page the same. There's an enrollment estimate. I'm going to put that at 250 because I know that you're going to be joining my course. That will be 250 roughly. And target group size 20. Leave it at 20 and 20. It's irrelevant for the course you are creating. I will explain later what that means and what that does. Just click Save Changes. And congratulations, you have just created your first course on Perusal. And granted, this is not probably a real course, but doing a real course is not much more work. It's not more work at all, it's the same. The only thing that you may have one or two steps for is for the integration with your learning management system. So we should all at this point have the 1, 2, 3 that you see in my browser window on our browser. So to set up the course, one is to get students enrolled. Well, we're not going to really get students enrolled. I'm going to get you enrolled in my course later, but you don't need to do that right now because this is not a real course. And the only thing that you really need to do is copy that code and give it to your students. That's really all you have to do. We're not gonna do that. I'm gonna later on give you that code in the chat. So let's ignore that for now. The next one is to choose readings by clicking documents. You can either click documents at the top, or this is what I would like you to do right now. Click on the arrow to the right of two, the middle arrow on the right of your browser screen. That brings you to the document window of your course. Perusal can handle a lot of different documents. I'll give you the list later on. We're going to be experimenting with a PDF document. So maybe you want to take a second or so to find a small PDF document on your disk. Don't upload something that's many megabytes because it's going to take a while to convert. Just take something small. It's totally irrelevant. Nobody will see it, only you. It could be an article you've downloaded from the library or from a magazine. It could be a PDF of a web page. It could be a utility bill. It could be anything. Just a small, 2, 3, 4-page PDF document. I will upload an article that I want you to actually read in a moment. So in order to add that document, go back to your browser and click the Add button on the top right of your screen, where I have my cursor right now. And we're going to select the option Documents from my computer. So select Documents from your computer and navigate to the article you want to upload. I'm going to upload an article which is truly fascinating. It was an article that appeared in the Financial Times right around the time that most of us went online, written by Yuval Harari, the author of books like Homo Deus and Sapiens, a futurist really. And the title of that article is The World After Coronavirus, in which he poses a number of really interesting questions that have a direct relevance to us in education. And I'd like to spend part of today's webinar discussing this article. So after you've selected your PDF file, you should see a screen that's pretty similar to mine, with the PDF being converted from PDF, or if it's a Word file, it will be a Word file that's converted, and so on. From whatever format it is in, it would get converted, or it is being converted to HTML5, so it can be displayed and interacted with on a computer screen, and also so that the original PDF is protected in the sense that students cannot just download it, post it, and disseminate it. So if you're developing a manuscript and you would like to use your manuscript, you can upload it without being concerned about the manuscript leaking out to the world at large. If you want your students to be able to download, that's perfectly fine. That's an easy setting in Perusall. Now, you're not restricted to PDF articles. You can do many different files, as I said, but in addition to files, you could also decide that you want to use a textbook if you use a textbook in your course. So while our articles are being converted, why don't we explore the textbook option right now? And also, what I should explain to you is that it doesn't have to be one article. You can upload a bunch of articles. You can organize them in folders. So for example, in the fall semester, I teach a seminar-based course where each week the students are reading and discussing and annotating a number of articles from professional journals. And I essentially have one folder for each week. I put the articles in that folder, and the students read the relevant folder every week. So you can have much more. You could have a mix of articles and textbooks, or things that are illustrations, slides. I mean, there are many, many different files you can use. But let's briefly explore the textbook option. Depending on where you are in the world, the number of textbooks that are available may be different. That is because of the licenses that we have with, or the agreements we have with publishers. As you can see, in North America, we have about 250,000 books in the catalog. So most books you can find, and I can type in my own name here, or you can type in, you can explore the different publishers that have agreements with Perusall. Now, most of these books I didn't write; they're actually not me. But since we have a few people from Italy here online, let me take Inferno from Dante Alighieri. If I were to want to use this book in my course, the only thing I have to do is click on request title, which I'm not going to do because I don't want to actually request it. And then students would have access to the book. I will explain later how that works with commercial material. So let's click out of that. And as you see, my document has converted. Yours may still be converting if it's a large document, or if there's a lot of load on the server. I know there's 240 people who are converting PDF documents now, so it may take a moment. You don't need to remain on that page. You can do different things as you go on the page. But if it has converted, what I want you to do is click on the Assign button. And when you make an assignment for the students in your course, the first thing to do is to select the content. I've only uploaded one article, so that's the only content I can choose. And I can either assign the entire article or a page range, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to have you read later on page 1 through 4. So I select page 1 through 4. I could add another part. I could say 1 through 4 and 10 through 12, but I'm not going to do that. Just 1 through 4 because we won't have much time to read anyway. And then the next step is to give the assignment deadline. We'll do it today. And let's see, we'll be generous here. We'll do it 11:50. You're going to start working on that in just a second. And the assignment name will be webinar assignment. You can give it whatever name you want. I could add instructions. I can do more things, but I'm not going to do any more things like fine-tuning any credit the students get for it. I'm just going to hit Save Changes. As you see, I immediately get analytics. I can see the overall assignment progress, which is not great. 100% of people have no work submitted, which is not surprising because you're not on my course right now. And I'll show you some of the other options later on. So one other thing I want to do before I ask you to join my course, I would like you to click on Settings, just below Course Home on the left. Click on Settings, and then on Scoring. You don't have to have any scoring, which, again, if you have scoring, it will automatically be transferred back to your learning management system if you've integrated Perusal with. Ideally, I want students to participate out of intrinsic motivations, but as we all know, purely intrinsic motivation might not always work. It might work in some educational settings, maybe graduate courses, maybe courses for majors, but quite in general for larger courses and non-majors, students need some extra incentive. Now, there are two ways, there are many ways you can set the scoring, but there are two presets, and they're shown here in the middle of the screen. There's one that only looks at annotation content, and one which is a holistic grading scheme, which, as you can see there, is recommended, but unfortunately, it is not the default. So in your courses, I highly recommend, just as this word here says, that you click on the holistic scheme. Notice that doing that immediately reduces the annotation content score from 100% to 60, and then it uses a lot of other metrics that measure students' engagement to give the other 40% of the grade. And we found that with that change, we can much better motivate the students to participate in Perusal and also leave very little to no room for gaming the system. In fact, it becomes completely impossible. And the basic idea behind this, and it's based on research that Kelly and I carried out. We have a lot of students using Perusal right now. I looked this morning, we're a hair shy of 600,000 students worldwide who are using Perusal. We have a lot of data, and we have been able to correlate online behavior with in-room classroom performance and look at which features, if you want, of online behavior most strongly correlate with online behavior. So when you click on holistic, it actually sets it to try to promote that type of online behavior. For example, Kelly and I found that students who chunk the reading, meaning breaking it up in little bits, do better than students who spend exactly the same time but do it all in one sitting. So if you spend an hour reading an article but you do it in 10 minutes chunks, and I do it in 1 hour, you tend to do better in the classroom than I. It's not that surprising because there's more time to process, and there's also more opportunities to go back and forth with other students. So perusal will try to nudge students to their behavior by telling them, hey, you know, you've been here for a very long sitting, why don't you break it up in more times? And it essentially tries to nudge students to display that behavior. So be sure to click holistic scheme and then save changes. I have to make sure that that is going to be the default approach that is used in Pearson, because it should really not just be recommended, but be the default approach. Okay, so be sure to click Save Changes, even though it's not really important for the current course, because the course you probably create is not going to. What I would like you to do now is click on Perusal at the top there, because I'm going to ask you to join my course. So whether you are a new user or an experienced user, you should have the same screen in front of you with the same tiles at the top. Create course, we've just explored. Copy a course would be if you have a course 1 year and you want to use it the next year. I want you now to click on the third tile, enroll in a course, which brings up a prompt for course code. And the course code, which I typed in right there. And again, I see that somebody may have messaged me privately. If you did that, then unfortunately, I will not have seen it. So be sure to make your chat public rather than privately with me. So the course code is right there. I put it in the chat and it's also on the screen. And after you've done that, click Save Changes. I'm not going to do that because I already have my course and I don't need to enroll as a student myself. Now, before you dive into it, wait, okay? It should show you an assignment. I'm going to open the assignment myself. You may want to do that too, but don't start playing yet. And notice that as people open the assignment and join, I start to see their avatars here on the top left. Roberto, thank you for joining, and thank you for joining the assignment. Ofer and Jessica and Terry and David and Liz, thank you all for joining. Now you will see a different list. Your list will be much shorter than mine. And thank you for starting to annotate already, but please hold off for a second. So your list will be much shorter because I, as the instructor, see everybody, but you've been put into groups of 20. Research, again, that we did early on showed that if you let a whole class, and we have some classes, you know, that have over 700 students loose on a document, it becomes so chaotic because there are so many students commenting and annotating and everything that it becomes overwhelming. If you put too few students in it, it becomes too sparse and there's not enough opportunity for interaction. So research, and again, the article is in the handout that I provide at the end, shows that the optimum group size is somewhere between 10 and 40, and therefore we set the default to 20. So you will not see more than 20 people on your screen, but I will see all 236 people who are currently in the webinar on there. So you can highlight a text. I'm going to highlight, I wanted to actually highlight the storm will pass. Jesper, could I ask you to delete your annotation, please? So you can click on this and then hit the delete key, because I wanted to highlight exactly that, which I can do, but I just don't want to add to your highlight. So Jesper, if you click on, you already deleted it. Okay, so I may have to refresh my page. Thank you so much. Okay, so as Jesper showed, you can highlight something, but I want to show you. So look at my screen. If I highlight something and I wanted to highlight the storm will pass, it opens a chat window here that very much looks like chat on Facebook or on your phone or whatever. And I can type in a question, right? The storm will pass. I'm increasingly worried about how long it will take. Anybody have any ideas? Now, you will not see, Jesper has removed his highlight. I added the highlight here, but I haven't hit return yet. So you will not see these were highlighted. But as soon as I hit return, the highlight sticks. And now on your screen, you should be able to see that highlight. You can click on it. And if I could have one or two people respond to my question, you will see that I get notified. I get notified here in this notification tray. And if the avatar of the person is there, there's actually a bubble that will show that person as if the person is speaking to me. So if I click on the notification trail, I see people saying, responding to it. And if I open this, I open the actual chat. Now, I see that we have quite a range here. I saw some people 2 years, and all other people say not too long. So I think it's we should probably try to by morning. I love that. I'm going to vote that one up. You see, in Facebook we have like buttons. Here we have no like buttons, but we have a question button, which I'll explain in a second, and we have a "this helps my understanding" button, or "I like this explanation" button. I definitely like by morning here by PW, who is, let's see, where was it? There, I couldn't read it. Well, I'll get to that later. And notice that as more people click on this checkbox, the number in front. So why don't we add a few more clicks here on this checkbox for by the morning? I think we have to upvote that answer. We need to be optimistic. This better be over tomorrow. There we go. You see that the number goes up. Likewise, if you click this question mark button or any other one, you will get notified whenever somebody else adds it, even if you're not online. Now we're all doing this synchronously. It's not meant to be synchronous. I can already see that 65 people have followed up on mine. And this means that I probably will have received 65 email messages to alert me to the responses. If you check this question mark, you will get informed of students' responses. I'm going to show you one or two more things before I let you loose, because I do want you to read this article. It actually makes a really important point, and I think a point that will affect our lives, not only outside of academia, but also in academia. It will change. And when I read that article, it sort of resonated with me. He mentions education in the first two paragraphs, but he does not continue to elaborate on it, which is something I'd like to discuss later on in about 10 minutes or so. The crux of the article is really these first two sentences of the second paragraph. Many short-term emergency measures will become a fixture of life. That is the nature of emergencies. They fast forward historical processes. So the question I really want to pose is, have we fast forwarded the future of education? Now, I've already shown that I can pose the question, but let's say that I really want somebody specific in my class to answer that. I can type in the @ symbol and then start typing the first few letters of a name. I see that Margriet van der Waal is online. So as I type the first few letters of her name, it narrows it down to people who have those letters in the name. I can click on Margriet's name, and if I hit return, Margriet will see her notification tray light up, and her attention is drawn to my annotation, even if she's in a very different spot on the article. So Margriet, maybe you can click on your notification tray and then respond to my question. Incidentally, if you're not online, you get an email. And if you respond to the email, then I see this is Mustafa who replied, but let's see if Margriet can also reply. You will get an email, and you can actually simply reply to the email, and then that email will get magically inserted into the chat as if you were online. It's something you may want to play with because it's truly miraculous. I still get excited by that. A few more things. Let's say you have something visual, say you teach art history or you teach music, and we have people who are teaching those disciplines who are using perusal. You want students to annotate a musical score rather than or a diagram in a science textbook. In that case, then there are some illustrations here. You know, the text cursor won't do you any good. However, you can select the figure annotation tool, and then either drop a pin. I can, for example, ask, "What is this? Is this a hydrant, or is it a fountain?" Or I could select a region and ask, "Is this a dog or a cat?" Question mark. So those are options for annotating things that are not text-based. So here's what I would like you to do, and I'm going to give you only 2 minutes for it. Oh my, we already have a lot of annotations here. So I want you to go to this All Comments menu at the top and select My Comments. That will remove the noise. So select My Comments. And now I'm going to give you 2 minutes to quietly read the first few pages of this article. And read it not to play with perusal. Read it because there's an important message here that should be thought about. It's mostly about surveillance and personal liberty. I want to think about this in the context of education. So please read it. And whenever there's something that you think is interesting or debatable, highlight it, pose a question, add a comment, either way. So 2 minutes, I'll turn off my microphone and I'll catch up with your chat in Zoom while you do this. Wow, I can't believe the number of questions, which is good, but I do want you to focus for a moment on the content of the article. Also, a number of people are asking me questions privately. Not a good idea because the chat is going by very fast and I am focusing on what I'm saying rather than on the chat. Alessandra Campos has asked me, how do I go to the Zoom group? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Please ask the question publicly so others can help you, because I'll need to return to our activity here. And thank you, Kelly, for handling that. I see there's been a lot of activity. It's good. I want people to be engaged. Okay, so I've not given you a lot of time. So what I want you to do now, and I'm going to give you 1 more minute, but I want you to change something. So go back to your Safari window and or a browser window, pardon me, and click on My Comments at the top, and select all comments. Notice that my menu looks a little bit different. I have the instructor menu, you have the student menu. So I can go to a specific group. You've been put into 13 groups. I could go to group 6, and then I still see all the avatars of everybody, but I see the annotations from group 6. Or I could go to all comments, and now you see why we need to partition things into groups, because essentially everything ends up being marked up if you have 240 people there. So I'll go do all comments, and you can do all comments too. You'll see less than I see. And if you click on the double balloon on the right side of the window where it says all conversations, you should see all of the questions. And as you scroll through them, you can see where in the page they occur. And most importantly, you can see which are questions or which have been tagged as questions and which have not been tagged as questions. And you can see that some are not really questions. People just played with the button as they clicked. My friend says tomorrow. But what I want you to do is I want you to try to find a question, like this is, for example, this is one, and this is one, and answer that question so that somebody else will get notified of your answering that question. So try to answer in the next minute somebody else's question, and try to also maybe play with invoking somebody else in your group. So just type in hello at, and then I can type Eric, and I see that Eric Yao is online. And if I had returned one more time, and Eric Yao will get notified. 1 minute to do that. And then we move on, and we'll go also to the interactive teaching part, which will be a lot shorter, but I just want to give you a taste of that. So you should see your notification tray light up. A lot of people, Eric, thank you. A lot of people have reacted to that first thread, so it's kind of overwhelming for me. A cat dog, I like that. So if your notification tray lights up, click on it, and then you can jump straight to the place where you have the notification. I've managed to erase all of my notifications. That's good. Oops, no more. Good. Well, you have seen the tip of the iceberg. There are so many more features, but I don't know where to start. Since I'm going to hang around after the webinar, I'm happy to show you more, to tell you more. I just want to point out a few more things. Notice that quite a few more people have done some work now, 86%. If I look at the analytics, they won't be that great yet. I mean, you haven't been engaged with the text long enough to earn full score. And, many of you are still, at the 0 level. Because you need real engagement. You can see which pages have been viewed more than others. You can do an activity by a student. You can see a heat map of annotations. There are many different ways you can look at it. Also, if for a moment you click, no, don't do that, because there won't be anything for you to watch. But if I go to the course settings, and I click grade book, immediately I get a complete accounting of the scores for all of you, which, as I said, are still low because there hasn't been a real engagement yet. We'd have to be a lot longer. But I can click on anybody's grade and see how many annotations were placed, how many were submitted on time before the deadline, what about the content of it, what about the reading. All of that is immediately fed back and goes straight back into your learning management system. The other thing is the confusion report, and maybe I should pause for one moment to tell you a little bit about it. When we first started doing this, I actually used the manuscript of a book I was writing. And this was for me a way to see what my students were thinking about my own writing. And I promise you that when you start using this in your courses, you'll end up getting a lot of respect for your students, because suddenly you become aware of the fact that there are many misunderstandings due to the fuzziness of language. As experts in our discipline, we use words with a very narrowly defined meaning, and usually much more narrow than the daily language definition of the words. And you'll read your students' questions and you'll go, oh no, that's what they're thinking. You know, even something that's totally clear to you might be unclear because of a different meaning attached to certain words by your students. And I promise you that you'll be itching to jump into the discussion. I urge you not to do that. I urge you to leave perusal as the space for the students. At least you're aware of their understanding and you can address that in the next step, namely in the sense-making part. When you jump into the discussion with your students, you'll very effectively kill the interaction, because now they expect you to answer their question, than they answering each other's question. And they'll become also much more afraid of answering questions because they might make a fool of themselves when you later correct them. So I urge you not to do that, even if you see something that's patently wrong. If you see something that's patently wrong, address it in the next step of the educational process, not on perusal. And to help you with that next step, we have a confusion report. Unfortunately, there's not enough annotation to draw a confusion report for this course yet. But if I go to one of my other courses, for example, my physics course, and I go to a chapter, I can click on the confusion report and see where the main points of confusion. So interference slits was one topic where students had questions. And here you can see three representative types of questions that the students have on the subject. If that's not enough, I can click on show more and see additional ones. On diffraction of light was another topic that students had question about. And here are three representative questions on that subject. And I can see where in the context of the writing that occurs. The energy of electrons in diffraction is another one. So I can essentially get a machine learning analysis, if you want, of the annotations and get feedback on the reading. Okay, this is just the top of the iceberg, so to speak, but I want to go on because I want to spend 10 minutes on the second part. Why is it that perusal works so well? Because it is in context, right? I could use Piazza or any other discussion forum, but then students would have to write on page or in the second paragraph of this article, I really writes, and then I had to quote and put my question. Here, the comment is made in the context of the original piece. I already alluded to, although there's much more to say about it, about the incentivation and the motivation for participation, more about that at the end of the webinar. I told you about the machine learning analysis of the engagement as well as the confusion report, so I won't spend much more time on that. A few notes: the perusal platform is completely free. There's no cost for it. Many textbooks in courses that are already underway are currently free until the summer. Research shows that there's nearly 100% reading assignment completion. So in my course, for example, 97% of the students completes their reading assignment from the beginning of the semester to the end of the semester. And this is not only a Harvard effect, we have similar data from many other institutions. And also there's ample evidence that students who use perusal, and that's not that surprising, of course, perform better in their courses. So what documents can you use? Well, anything that's PDF, Word, HTML, or an EPUB file. Any open access material, including OpenStax textbooks. If you are teaching computer science and you want to use source code, you can upload that, and there'll be syntax highlighting for almost all computer languages, and certainly all those that we're aware of. And if you want to use a commercial textbook from a publisher, then that is possible too, either through institutional purchases or by students. And again, if you have questions about the details of that, how to implement, for example, institutional or university bookstore purchases, please write to support@perusal.com. This is the growing list of publishers that are offering free textbooks for courses until the summer. More information on Perusal. So last 10 minutes here, I would like to briefly go and talk about the sense-making part. And those of you who know about my work know that almost 30 years ago, it was 1991, I developed this interactive teaching approach called peer instruction, never imagining that I would apply that online. I'm going to demonstrate it to you online. For those of you who are not familiar with peer instruction, it's an interactive teaching method, and it's one that actually promotes meaningful thinking, promotes discourse about the reasons for giving an answer, not just the answer. And it does that by questioning. So in the next few minutes, you will experience peer instruction by answering a question individually, and the answer is related to, or sorry, the question is related to the article from Harari, which you just read. And then I will send you into breakout rooms where you will meet 5 or 6 other people. You will probably not know those people. In my class, I send the teams into each of their different team breakout rooms. But since we don't have any teams and since we're all strangers to each other, you'll end up with random people. Introduce yourselves to each other briefly, but keep that brief. I am Eric Mazur. I teach physics at Harvard in Boston in the US. And then start talking about why you gave the answer that you gave. I mean, the temptation may be big to talk about Perusal or talk about anything else. Please don't do that. There'll be an opportunity to talk about that later on. Talk about why. I want you to think about what the pandemic and the crisis that we're going through right now, what the long-term effect will be on our educational practices. So you will answer the question individually, then you will discuss them in the breakout rooms and re-answer the question. So please pull up this browser, paulev.com/Eric Mazur 615. You will see a question there. The COVID pandemic has caused a sudden and massive switch to online learning. Once the pandemic is over, which is the most likely outcome 10 years from now? I would like you to select what you believe is the most likely outcome. And of course, there is no right answer. Well, at least there's no right answer now. There might be a right answer 10 years from now. We're not going to wait that long. So please select what you believe to be the most likely response. And while you do that, I'm going to start assigning you to breakout rooms. And I'm going to come and visit a few breakout rooms, okay? So you may see me pop into your room. And if I don't see you talk about the question, I'm just kidding. Okay, we have a pretty broad distribution, with people thinking we're just going to go straight back to what we have, and others thinking this is the end of universities as we know them. This is the end of our educational practices. It will certainly be true for the short term, but some people clearly are of the opinion that it might stick. So here is what we're going to do. I'm going to put you in the breakout rooms. I'm going to lock the answers right now. I'm going to put you in a breakout room so you can no longer vote. I'll reopen it in a second, and introduce yourselves to each other, and then please start discussing why you think what you chose is what is going to happen. if you're still in the main room, you should have been assigned to a breakout room. Maybe it takes a moment. Joost, you left the breakout room. I'm going to put you in another one. I'm going to hop into a breakout room myself, so it's going to get very quiet here. I hope you get to join your breakout room. I see that there are still a few people. Shuji, Patricia, David, Jiri, who are in the main room. Do you want me to try to assign you to a breakout room? Karen, Robert, I'm going to put you in a breakout room. Well, welcome back to the main room. I hope you had fun meeting some people from different parts of the world. And I went into several rooms and I was happy to see people engage in talking. Now, if this were a real class, I would wrap this up as a discussion, was a more general discussion, but it isn't. It's interesting to see that there are far fewer people now who thinks we'll just go back to the way things were before. I mean, I would say the largest number of responses are for B, and there are actually a surprisingly large fraction who answer C. That we're at a turning point, and I tend to agree. But anyway, this is not the purpose of this webinar. The purpose of the webinar is to demonstrate this teaching approach. So, as I said, when I developed P instruction, I'm going to go back to sharing my my slides here. I never imagined ever doing this online because I was never forced to think about doing that online. And essentially, what I do in the classroom, which I do now online using these breakout rooms, is I ask a question, I give students time to think, just like I gave you time to think. I poll them, and there are many different ways of polling them. There is a polling feature in Zoom. However, that does not work well for the following reason. And I would urge you not to use it, because if you ask a question on the poll in Zoom and then you send people into the breakout rooms, the poll does not follow you into the breakout room. So all of a sudden you lose the question, you lose the answer choices. You no longer know, unless you've taken a screenshot, you don't know what you're discussing anymore. And I've seen that it affects the interactivity in the breakout rooms. We use poll everywhere. I don't use poll everywhere in my own classes. I use a platform learning catalyst, but I wanted to show you a free tool. There are many, Socrative and many others. Use it in a separate browser window so the students can take it with them into. I use the multiple choice question. I typically do not use multiple choice questions. Poll Everywhere permits you to use graphical questions, word clouds, and so on. And there are quite a few platforms that have a rich variety of question modalities. Anyway, so poll, I typically do not show the poll before I put people into the breakout rooms and have them talk to each other. I forgot to tell you one important thing, which is you need to find somebody with a different answer in your room. I guess I'm not completely awake yet today. So you need to be sure that you find somebody with a different answer. It's all too convenient for students to say, oh, that person has the same answer. We must both be right, or we agree, there's nothing to discuss. So it's very important to tell people to find people who have given a different answer. Even if there's no right answer, that's still true. And for that reason, I don't show the poll before the discussion because it can bias the discussion. There was a majority, for example, for choice B. If people go into the discussion knowing that the majority is B, it will make the discussion a lot less lively. I repoll them. I end up with an explanation, which typically does not have to come from me. I would have a student give an explanation, and then that cycle repeats until the end. Now, why does this work? It works because it engages students to think. It's not just about the answer. It's really about, how did you get that answer? Why do you think that is the case? And in a sense, it individualizes also the learning, right? Because rather than having the students listen to me, they can help each other in parallel. Student A can help student B. Student C can help student D, even though B and D have two very different problems. And it comes back also to this point that I mentioned earlier, that students don't suffer from a problem that we all suffer from, namely the expert blind spot, as Susan Ambrose calls it in her book, How Learning Works, or my colleague Steven Pinker calls the curse of knowledge. But what is perhaps most exciting is that it's a fantastic way to engaging students online. I went into a room And there were people from the Netherlands, there were people from Turkey, there were people from the US, and they were all talking together. We were engaged. Now imagine your students going home to wherever their homes are, and you get them to interact with each other. It's just phenomenal how this translates well to an online environment. And rather than having the students sit passively watching a video, they actually interact with each other. And as I said, it beautifully integrates this perusal, because you can take what's left of perusal and address it in this question and answer modality. Also, research shows that it greatly improves the learning outcomes. So that's essentially what I wanted to present. I want to spend a few more minutes reflecting on the future. So when we're going back to campus, of course, I'm not going to move back the information transfer to campus because I never did it on campus. I'm going to move the sense making back to the classroom whenever it is that we get the ability to do that. And I'm going to end up with what I was actually already doing before, the sense making, the hard part on campus under my guidance, and then the information transfer online asynchronously in a self-paced mode. And notice that that's very different from the old approach, right? Where the old approach, it was the easy step, the information transfer that was taking place on campus, and the sense making was left to the students. Now, I haven't told you how I move projects online, how I do assessment, how I do homework and tutorials and experimental activities. Maybe I should do another webinar about that. I haven't had time really to really think how I would do that. I have done it, how I would do the webinar. I mean, I think I have solutions for all of these activities, but at least I want to give you a way of thinking about it, which is the way I thought about it when I was faced with the prospect of moving this online. I started to realize that not only had I made a shift in my classroom from faculty or instructor-centered to student-centered, I'd done this all along, the move online forced me to reconsider the difference between synchronous activities, by which I mean everybody together at the same time, and asynchronous, as well as instructor-paced, meaning everybody at the same pace, versus self-paced. Now, just think about everybody at the same pace. We know students don't learn at the same rate. Some will learn faster than others. Some will learn faster than others sometimes and more slowly other times. It's not, we in a sense treat education as a conveyor belt where everybody moves at exactly the same rate, which is not matching our students' needs that may be different at different times. So as I was moving the different things online, I thought it would be good to think about the need for having synchronous and or instructor-paced activities. So a lecture, for example, is synchronous and instructor-paced. A recorded lecture becomes asynchronous and still is instructor-paced. A lab where you bring students to do an experiment in a space on campus is synchronous and self-paced. Homework or study is asynchronous and self-paced. So as I moved the different components of my course online, I told myself, to whatever extent I can, I should move things from synchronous to asynchronous and from instructor-paced to self-paced, because that will permit me to spend the time there where I really need to spend it and improve education. And you know what? I found out that there were certain things I did in my class synchronously for which there was no need to do it synchronously. It was just a historical artifact, in the sense, brought upon the course simply by virtue of having a classroom assigned. So I know already now that there are certain changes I made for the online adaptation that will never revert back to the way they were before.